Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Friday, 9th of March 2018, and once again I'm in one of my favourite spots in East Lancashire on the banks of the Liverpool-Leeds Canal. And had I been here yesterday morning, I would have been standing in 3 inches of snow, and I thought we were in for a second bout of Russian snow. But it was washed away by lunchtime, so it's a beautiful morning here. The hills are full of something, whether it's the clouds of snow or clouds of rain, but nonetheless I'm going to enjoy the sun while I got the opportunity. Now, apologies for the lack of a live stream yesterday, and Lou Hammond sends her apologies. There were some technical difficulties. I think it was probably due to the hair and makeup team not actually arriving on time, but c'est la vie. We move forward, and Lou will undoubtedly be back with a live stream sometime very soon. So today is yet another day of celebration amongst the anti-fracking community, because yesterday Ineos, and in particular their chief operations officer, the most arrogant Tom Pickering, got totally spanked. Now, Tom Pickering must be some kind of masochist. He must enjoy actually being the centre of attention across the north of England, because he must now know that whenever he walks into a debate, a drop-in meeting, or as with yesterday, a planning committee hearing as at the Rotherham Metropolitan Borough District Council, he is on a hiding to nothing. And yesterday, in the words of the chairman of the committee, Ineos have not exactly covered themselves in glory. And he experienced the same as anybody experiences when they go to an Ineos dropping meeting. The moment anybody actually presents evidence to counter what Tom Pickering is spouting forth, he simply just carries on talking. And anybody who tries to interject, he just carries on talking over them in the hope that you'll just go away. It's a sort of bit of a war of attrition, really. So I don't know what it is about the mentality, the sociopathic mentality that wants to absolutely celebrate the fact that pretty much everyone they talk to thinks they are a complete and utter sociopath. And Tom Pickering certainly seems to be achieving that. But I have to say that I am sensing increasingly that he's very much a dead man walking. Now, before anybody lashes onto that phrase, I am, of course, using it as a metaphor. And as with Gary Hayward, who left Ineos about a year ago, supposedly to take retirement, but coincidentally, it was after he got totally spanked by Dennis May, one of the leading players in frack-free Nottinghamshire. So Ineos have now lost every hearing that they have tried to sweet talk a planning committee or a council, and some of those have been Tories. I mean, the Derbyshire County Council vote was 9-1, so one vote in favour of Ineos, and that's a Tory council. So the industry's not looking too good. You know, it's what now, about 9 weeks since the start of the year, maybe we're in the 10th week. And in that time, out of, 9 planning hearings, it's basically only one that's gone in the favour of the unconventional gas industry. And that was Quadzilla's application to return to Balcombe, which was approved by West Sussex County Council. But, you know, we know the West Sussex County Council had been put under extreme pressure by the high percentage of Tory MPs in the area who were pushing the government agenda. And of course, let's not forget that West Sussex County Council had effectively been threatened that if they did vote against, then there was the distinct possibility that they could be sued individually. And of course, this is the BS that was being pumped around a couple of years ago by the legal teams representing the Cameron Osborne government. But this is pretty much all they've got left, which is why you will never ever hear the government or the industry talking about getting social license anymore, because they know it just isn't going to happen. So it was a great day, and an absolute tribute to the work that has been undertaken in South Yorkshire. And there's no question that the level of awareness in South Yorkshire is very high. And whomever it is, whether it's Ineos or whether it's iGas, who are looking to get into South Yorkshire, they have an enormous fight ahead of them. Unfortunately, Misson Springs and Tinker Lane, which are right in the far northeastern corner of Nottinghamshire, are actually far closer to South Yorkshire and Lincolnshire than they are to Nottingham. And so, it's never been more important for the anti-fracking community of another county to actually cross the border and support those in the adjoining county, because frac fluid, rogue frac fluid, rogue flowback, road leakages, rogue spillages don't recognise county borders. So the fact that it's Nottinghamshire, but it's very, very close to South Yorkshire and Lincolnshire, this needs to be a tri-county focus to stop iGas from getting their bits in the ground at both Misson Springs and Tinker Lane. iGas should, of course, have stopped working again at Misson Springs due to the excessive noise levels, but iGas have claimed that the excessive noise levels are from another source. Well, there's no other source around there except the area of special scientific interest which adjoins their site. So maybe, the breeding owls, the long-eared owls that nest adjacent to the site, maybe their mating was generating noise levels in excess of 62 decibels. Well, at the moment, the council's noise specialist is analysing the data, but that means, of course, that iGas can continue working. But they have to stop work if they haven't finished the construction phase by the end of this month. So numbers, boots on the ground, very, very important at both Misson Springs and Tinker Lane in North Nottinghamshire, but very, very close to South Yorkshire and North West Lincolnshire. So surely Jim Ratcliffe is going to realise that Tom Pickering is a massive liability. He is a similar sort of liability to Mark Miller, of course, who was the chief executive of Quadrilla some 6 years ago, when he walked into a public meeting in Balcombe and said, by the end of the meeting you're going to be eating out the palms of my hand. Yeah, he got that a little wrong. And it's the same hubris, it's the same arrogance that seems to be a trademark of senior executives within the unconventional gas industry. I'm sure it's the same trademark as many industries, but right now we're focusing on unconventional gas. So Jimbo, are you going to let Tom Pickering and Ron Coyle continue to throw money down a literal and a metaphorical black hole? Because that's what's happening here. The reality is that every time Pickering opens his mouth, he puts his foot in it. He's one of the best recruiting tools for the anti-fracking community. So from my perspective, leave him in situ, because it's wonderful, because it makes our life so much easier. Taking on the National Trust, what an inspiration. What an act of brilliance, increasing the opposition exponentially overnight. So somehow I think we're going to start to see Tom Pickering's resume being pumped out, in the wider market, as I'm sure he starts to get somewhat nervous that he's going to be called to account to start to explain the enormous sums of money, not to mention the legal challenges and the cost of those that he's actually initiating. So watch this space. So Ineos, of course, they're not publicly listed, so there's not a stock price to monitor. It's a company that operates without any real transparency, and that, as I've said before, may well be its Achilles heel, because maybe when Jim Ratcliffe starts to realise the degree to which the Treasury and the other reviewing bodies start to take interest in their accounts, he might actually decide that, we'd actually rather keep everything a little quiet here. So we don't know, what the ultimate straw is that's going to break the back of this nascent industry. So that's why it's so important just to keep plugging away. It's why it's so important to keep spreading the word, to keep building the anti-fracking community right around the country. And of course, you know, not only has there been the massive success in the planning meetings around the country, we've also, of course, had Third Energy, or Barclays Bank trading as Third Energy, skulking out of Kirby Misperton with their tail very firmly between their legs, desperately trying to fight a rearguard public relations exercise by first claiming that they were coming back after Easter, then claiming back that they were coming back in October, and then changing that, well, maybe sometime in the autumn. Well, let me actually paraphrase what that means in PR speak. It means never, because Third Energy in its current guise is going nowhere. You know, the debt levels, 100 times annual revenue, it's a dead dog. And as soon as Barclays can find some mug to pick it up, I mean, that might be Tom Pickering trying to buy it for the proverbial pennies in the pound, and telling his boss that, you know, yeah, well, this has got ready-made planning permission. Ha! You have no idea, Mr. Pickering, what you'd be up against in North Yorkshire. The North Yorkshire community is primed for Ineos. Now, the Third Energy campaign was just a warm-up. So, meanwhile, of course, we've got UCOG in the south, desperately trying to protect their disappearing business by seeking to get an injunction on pretty much anybody who makes any comment that might impact negatively upon their economic well-being. Well, I wonder if that applies to the counter, where they've had the likes of David Lenegas talking absolute shite about things like the Gatwick Gusher in a desperate attempt to lift the stock price to raise cash so that basically these guys can pay themselves their outrageous salaries and bonuses. Well, I am very, very certain that the UCOG application for an injunction will be challenged in the High Court on Monday week. But if I haven't served notice already, of course I have in writing on social media, but based on the application that, or the summary of the application for the injunction that I've seen, let me categorically state here and now that if that injunction is granted in its current format, then I would, without any hesitation, hold that court in absolute contempt. And I hereby also serve notice that I have every intention of breaching that injunction on a daily basis, because I shall take great stock in pointing out more and more of UCOG's failures. So once again, thank you, Stephen Sanderson, because it's a massive own goal. If you thought that this would help bring about publicity, working on the basis that no publicity is bad publicity, wrong again. Because we've had real difficulty actually getting sufficient critical mass of people in the southeast of England, particularly, to actually wake up to the magnitude of the threat that you, Stephen Sanderson, UCOG, and your other sociopathic wannabe motherfrackers are bringing about here. And consequently, you know what's occurring at Leith Hill, and of course they have a lesser injunction there, but what's occurring at Leith Hill with Europa, and now what you're trying to do with the injunction, is going to undoubtedly raise awareness. And we know that once people look at this for themselves, then they very quickly realise that it's actually something they need to get involved in. So once again, Stephen Sanderson, thank you for another massive PR own goal, and you know, contributing to raising awareness and increasing the resource, the expertise, the creativity within the burgeoning anti-fracking community. So it's going to be an interesting weekend, I think. I think there's going to be a lot of reflection on what's occurred over the past week. And of course, you know, the number of anti-fracking groups around the country is still growing exponentially. And you know, if you're watching this and you're not part of a group, or there's a group in your area, but for whatever reason you don't want to be part of that group, then go start your own. Because the more groups there are around the country, and don't fight each other, just carry on doing whatever it is you're doing. whatever it is that you think will be important in terms of literally shutting down this industry, putting the nails in the coffin and hammering them shut once and for all. So my last item for this morning is really to make mention and give a shout out to Jeff Bostock and his daughter Becca. Now, Jeff has been an absolute stalwart of the Kirby Misperton Protection Camp almost from the get-go. Now, I first met Jeff and Becca at a presentation I was giving in a pub in Accrington some, I don't know, 2 years ago or so. And I remember the day very well because it was absolutely pouring with rain. And even though my car was parked just across the road, every time I went out to the car, I got absolutely drenched. And at the end of that afternoon, I've been talking about the threat to Kirby Misperton and you know, the wider threat across Yorkshire. And Jeff and Becca came up to me and said, whenever it is that industry tries to get a foothold in my county, I will be there with you. And true to his word, I say literally within a day or so of us taking the field at Kirby Misperton, Jeff rocked up in his Reliant Robin and parked it just inside the gate. And from that point forward, Jeff became the camp gate man. His contribution in the early days was fantastic. He actually stood right behind the plough that the landowners' agents were trying to use to plough up the field to prevent us bringing any more vehicles onto the field. And he stood there and took the edge of the plough right in the sternum until the police came and eventually did the right thing and kicked the perpetrators off. You know, Jeff has been contributing through building, through construction, contributing physically and materially, contributing and donating the beautiful fire that takes centre place in the roundhouse. But just a couple of days ago, when Jeff was at Kirby Misperton Protection Camp to help with the clean-up process, he was taken ill. He was rushed to Scarborough Hospital, he did some tests, and then he was transferred to York, where he is right now. And I gather from speaking with Becca yesterday that he's making a recovery, he's sitting up, he is talking, but the hospital is still not 100% certain exactly what the problem is, or you know, what has triggered it. So to Jeff and to Becca, you know, first of all, of course, we wish you a very, very speedy recovery. And it's indicative of the fact that the average age, you know, within the anti-fracking community is probably the wrong side of 60. But, you know, there's many, many reasons for that. But, you know, it's also down to that older generation to do the clear up. And that's why Jeff was perhaps lifting a little bit more than he should have been when he was clearing up yesterday. So, Jeff, if you're watching this, I am going to drop in on you later today and make sure that you're doing everything the hospital says, which I somehow doubt, you know, being the stubborn Yorkshireman that you are. But I know you're going to make a full and a speedy recovery, and it won't be long before you're back on the front line. And don't forget, you have a very, very special act to perform at AV9. Yeah, so that's just about 8 weeks away now. So Jeff, get better, get back to full health as soon as possible, and thank you and Becca so much for your tremendous contribution at Kirby Misperton over the past, what is it now, 14 months or so. So, meanwhile, of course, the Kirby Misperton Protection Camp clear-up process is now well underway, and this weekend will be a full weekend of continuing that clear-up process. So if you're available, if you're anywhere near the Kirby Misperton Protection Camp, then please come along. The work will start around about 10 o'clock tomorrow. Lunch is going to be provided there on both days. So we have just a few weeks to get the field cleared and return it to the landowner in the condition that we found it, pretty much in the condition we found it, hopefully better, a little over 14 months ago. So join us for both days and come join the demolition party. So if you can't be there, have a great weekend, and don't forget, share, because some of us have been on this 5+ years, and we know that we still have work to do in raising awareness of the magnitude of the attack on this country's ecology. You know, if it was terrorists doing this, it'd be all over the media. But because it's the corporations, they actually get government and some media support. So it's up to us, the people of this country, to do what we know to be right to protect the ecology of this country for future generations. So thanks for joining me this week, and I will be back at 8:30 on Monday. Otherwise, hope to see you at Kirby Mist and Protection Camp sometime over the weekend. You take care now.